All right, so we're here today. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Matt Smith, Chief Executive Officer at Allsop's Lettings and Management. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks.
Good to have you. I'm going to keep looking down at my notes because probably regular viewers will notice that I'm not Guy Butler, and this is the first time in the hot seat. So Matt and I are amateurs at this, so please bear with us. So today we're gonna have a bit of a mazy dribble around the evolution of the BTR market and the product, its origins, where it's going, and the offshoots that we're starting to see in the market with co-living, single-family homes, and later living. But I think before we go through that, Matt, we're gonna get a bit of an introduction with you. I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm new to the business, so I've been with Glenbrook for just over a year now. You are a stalwart of Glenbrook, and we've got strong existing relationships, having delivered a number of very successful schemes over the years. We've got Vox, we've got Keel. You're going to have to remind me a few of these. I think we've got Trilogy as well.
Yeah.
Any more?
Duet.
And Duet
Salford as well.
And Salford as well, which I've got here in my notes, won Team of the Year and BTR Regional Development of the Year.
Did, yeah.
So congratulations. And I think Keel's the first institutionally funded BTR scheme in the UK.
It was, yeah. Back in
There we go.
2012, I think. Maybe 2013 I started working on that project. So that's how long I've known Guy Butler and Ian Sherry. Yeah. So we I first met them on a little shed on the Keel site. It was the former HMRC office in Liverpool, and they were turning it into something at the time that was coined build to rent. And I thought, this is a really good idea. So I've been hanging around ever since, and as you can see, Glenbrook keep producing these buildings, and we've been lucky enough to manage all four of them at Allsop. Don't manage all of them now because a number of them have transacted since, and management sometimes moves with the new owner. But all four of them have actually won. They've all won awards. The Keel, Trilogy, and Duet have all won BTR Site of the Year with home views.
Fantastic.
They've all been accredited with best in region, and it's down to a combination of really good management, really good mobilisation, and really good design. And I think that's all come together really well.
And I think we'll kind of move forward in a little bit, but I think we were just talking actually offline. Is that what we call it? I don't know if it's offline, but we were talking about how you're getting involved earlier on in the schemes, and it's refreshing to see you coming involved in those design team meetings early doors at conception. Do you think that really helps that process?
Yeah, it's made a huge difference. I mean, at the Keel, we were involved 12 months in advance of PC. More and more now, I think developers and owners are realising that really the money that they're going to try to make out of these sites it's capitalised net operating income. So you need to have your operator's view on what actually works, both from an OPEX perspective, but also from a customer experience perspective, because you need the two to be working. So typically we'd say mobilisation 12 months in advance of PC if we can. But if we can be involved with a site 2-3 years in advance and be having those conversations about unit mix, layout, even down to appliance sort of types, the type of window coverings you'll put in, the amenity sizes, and the actual amenity that you put in, then it's great from our perspective. And what we've always found is Glenbrook are very open to learning about their schemes after you've completed. You don't just finish a site and then walk away. What we find is that you're asking us questions 6-12 months later, saying, "Well, did that work? What hasn't worked?" And then it's just that iterative improvement that we see. So,
and it's almost crazy to think that we're not getting you guys involved at those early stages, because we've got we're talking about these amenity spaces, and we're talking about the provision, and are we going to have we're going to have a paddle tennis court on the rooftop, or are we going to have dog cleaning services? But the reality is, are those spaces being used? So it's a great advantage, I think, for us as a business. And we've talked about, and we've had you involved in a number of schemes that we're kind of moving forward with now. Good. Okay. Well, we don't want to go into the meat of it yet, so I want to kind of take a bit of a step back. We have established that you are living in Sheffield. You're not from Sheffield,
No.
but you are living in Sheffield now. You are a Liverpool fan,
I am, yeah.
which we need to talk about. But it's been a bit of a steep rise to Chief Executive Officer at Allsop's. I think was it 2022? Is that right?
Yeah. So I've had this role 2.5 years now, and it's going pretty well. We're expanding quite quickly. Been lucky enough to sign up with a number of new clients. So we're working with Roundhill Capital. They've got a big site in Manchester. Working with CDL on their Octagon building in Birmingham. And then we've got single family housing now, which is a big part of our business. So package living, Kennedy Wilson. That's not to say we're turning our back on BTR at all. It's just a representation of the market generally.
Yeah.
And then the year before, we mobilised and launched a site for Cold Water House over at Salford called Eda. So the BTR pipeline is still there.
Yeah,
and it's growing. It's just single family sort of caught it up a little bit over the last couple of years, just because of the sort of financial circumstances. But my background's asset management. So I was asset management director at Allsop before that. So it sort of felt like a natural step, really. We're trying to sort of move the business more towards a data-driven business. Looking at sort of the financial rationale for clients making investments.
Yeah.
How can we align ourselves with our clients? Well, it makes sense for a CEO of a business to try their best to be able to do that. And if I can understand your drivers or a funder's drivers, then I'm able to deliver that. So,
good.
Yeah. So it's been with Allsop 7 years, and then before that I was at Live Group briefly for about 18 months. So there's a massive sort of institutional investment at that time with those guys. M&G were the main client, and obviously they're a big funder in the BTR space as well. So
it's been a journey.
Yeah, it has. But it started with a Glenbrook building.
Yeah,
it started with a keel. So
and still here.
Yeah,
still here.
Yeah, and so's the building, luckily. So
good.
Yeah, all
good. Okay, so I think we're gonna dive in. We're gonna try and get into the meat of it, and I think we're probably, this conversation today is all around the BTR offering, and it's an area in which Glenbrook are very prominent in at the moment. And if you look at a lot of the schemes that we've delivered and a lot of the schemes that are coming forward, that's the kind of market we're in. But I think if we go back to the origins of where the BTR growth came from, we could probably look to kind of the early 2010s.
Yeah.
It was post the global crash. Mortgages were a lot harder to get hold of.
Yeah.
Finance rates were through the roof, and I think it was probably the kind of London market that are looking at kind of flexible living. They didn't want to be tied down. They wanted to be still in the centre of London. The other options were move out to Zone 5 or Watford, and I think that's probably where the BTR market was born. Yeah. And since then, it's kind of reverberated and it's grown arms and legs. We're in all the regions now. It's dominating the Northwest at the moment. What's your views on how and why BTR as a model has just captured the nation so much?
Well, I don't think it's an accident that started with London and Manchester. I think fundamentally those two markets worked.
Yeah.
But I also think the populace of those particular cities also, they're quite aspirational. They don't mind spending maybe a slightly higher proportion of their income on rent.
Yeah.
I think they want to feel like they're getting very good service.
Yeah.
And I think, the financial crash, one of the things it did do is it sort of put a bit of a pause on new stock coming through as well. So what you were seeing was older style PRS stock where a lot of the footprint was wasted on corridors, for instance. You'd open the door, you're straight into a corridor.
Yeah.
One of the first things you see with BTR is you open the door and you can usually see a window. So it's an experience piece. But going back to the amenity, I think you arrive in a building and you're reminded why you're paying your rent.
Yeah.
I think a lot of PRS tenants at that time, and still are to a certain extent, they're getting home and are they certain they're going to have, the value for money that they should get from their rent? So I think it's naturally the people were maybe not aware of what BTR was or was going to be, but the moment you could articulate what it was, then people are more than happy to pay a little bit more for a product or a service. So I think it's just you're tapping into a market that didn't know it existed, but it was definitely there.
It felt like there was a shift in attitudes as well.
Yeah.
That generationally we kind of probably crossed over from.
Sorry, you can tell this wasn't scripted. There you go.
We probably shifted over from a kind of millennial bracket, and I'll probably get these wrongs, and into more of a Gen Z who definitely had different aspirations on life. And I think a kind of long-termism that we had previously, where probably people of yours and our age, your parents would buy your house, you would work for one company. It completely changed, and I think people wanted a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. They're living in those city centres. There's that expectation that you work, you live, you play.
Yeah, I don't think people have given up on the idea of home ownership. I think there's probably two strands there. I think mortgage rates being what they are, deposit sizes being what they have to be in order to buy. I think people have started to accept that, okay, I'm going to be in rented that bit longer.
Yeah.
So why not make it something that I really want to live in? And then I think, to your point, really fundamentally, I think people had a bit of a shift. It stopped being about having something to keep and be yours, but rather, we lease a car. You lease your TV subscriptions. Everything is a subscription service, and you can switch it on and switch it off. And I think what BTR does quite neatly is it gives you access to a service, a better service, often with amenities that mean you can cancel other subscriptions like a gym membership.
Yeah.
So mentally, there's this financial saving there, perhaps, or a value proposition. And I then think you combine that with the fact that they can rent there and they can have this amazing experience and have all the trappings of a service, delivery.
It's on the doorstep, isn't it? That's the driver.
Yeah, exactly. It's reliable as well. It's institutional, so they can have it as long as they want it.
Yeah.
So the institution is willing to say, "I'll give you a 3-year AST. We're not as long as you behave yourself.
Yep.
We're happy to keep you. We want to keep you. We're not going to ask you to vacate just because we want to sell. Vacant possession for a sale isn't really a thing. It's these assets trade as more like a hotel. So it's a different product completely, and I think people will pay for it. But also, they'll pay for it not because it's a bit more expensive, but I get to stay. Because I actually really value what I'm being given here.
Yeah.
And the amenity at site reminds them every day, I think, the customer experience, being greeted as you're walking through the door.
Yeah.
Says,
makes a huge difference.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, you've got to remind these people. You've got to demonstrate why it's value. I looked at the Kale and I just thought, right, this is different. This is a different product. And I could see out where it was going as a market. And I thought, I want to be involved with this for the long term. And I said to you before, and you cling on in there, and eventually you end up running the place.
Yeah. And I suppose moving that forward now, we're 10, 15, 20 years into the growth of BTR in the UK, and we were talking previously about how that amenity offering has matured, it's developed. I think at the beginning we were very much in a position where we were almost throwing everything at an amenity provision as much as we can fit in. Let's utilize the whole space: cinema rooms, private dining rooms, dog cleaning rooms, maybe more recently, paddle, tennis courts.
Yeah.
But I think one thing we were, again, discussing earlier is that the cities in which these developments reside in have matured as well. And I think if we look back 15, 20 years, the gym offering, for example, in Manchester city centre was probably maybe a David Lloyd's or a Nuffield. Now we've got this array of CrossFit gyms, personal training gyms. So I think with that, the amenities had to pivot. We need to think really carefully about what it is the residents want, and not just what the architects think the residents want, and not just what the developers think these guys want. It's more what they're actually using.
Yeah.
So, and I think one of the key areas that we look on as a business in terms of our amenity, and it's a huge part of our schemes and our design development, but we tend to work around kind of 3 strong points, and I guess we probably look at it as we move forward. The amenity provision is absolutely paramount, but I think bringing you in today, and one of the reasons why we wanted you to be involved in this conversation was it's all about the management as well, isn't it? It's so key.
Yeah.
The best developments in the city and the UK wide, as soon as you walk in, you're greeted by someone who really cares, somebody who generally enjoys their job,
Yeah.
and has that relationship with those residents.
Totally agree. I think, if we take, let's take the Keel as an example. So the Keel is one of the first BTR sites in the UK.
Yeah.
You could describe it as BTR 1.0. Originally, the amenity was pretty light there. It had a gym, but there was breakout areas in the lobbies, but not, they were fairly sort of sterile spaces. So BTR 2.0 for that site was, okay, let's build a resident lounge. So we took an internal bin store out, moved it external, opened it out. You create co-working, you create a resident lounge, but it's flexibility. You had the flexibility within that design to be able to do that later. You take Trilogy, Vox, again, they've got an inherent flexibility within the design that enables you to flex with customer sort of patterns. Now, what our job is to notice what those patterns are. It's part of the asset management play, but it's also to feed back to funders and developers in order for the next iteration.
It's cyclical, isn't it? That process has to be cyclical.
Yeah. And so it's flexibility to be able to change the space. It's also flexibility to be able to use the space differently at different points of the day.
Yeah.
So a resident lounge, for instance, it's probably a co-working space during the day.
Yeah.
So you need somewhere comfortable to sit. You need it to be comfortable in such a way that you don't feel a bit awkward coming and sitting next to somebody else who you don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
But then in the evening, it becomes more of a social space, and our teams will help to facilitate that. So you might have somebody new in the building; they're looking a little bit awkward. Oh, well, come over here, come and sit here. Oh, by the way, this is Tommy, or this is Natasha. She lives in flat number 17. You guys both own dogs, or whatever it is. You find commonality, but it's our role to work out what that common strand is. So our brand ethos is that every customer by name. You greet them as they come in, and you interact with them. We don't have this sort of sterile management office out back where our guys hide away. Our general managers are always working in the sort of the co-working space or the residence lounge. And the best schemes I go into, and there are other operators out there doing this, they also have that approach to their customers. They are customers, not tenants. They get called residents, that's fine, but ultimately they're paying for a service and you have to provide it. But the amenity space it's really important, but it doesn't have to be the be all and end all. There are heavily amenitized products out there that aren't delivering anywhere near the right level of customer service. And you can see that when you look at different.
And they become quite cold, unused spaces, don't they?
Yeah, as you say, you walk into buildings and you get a vibe. You can pick up on it. I love walking into different sites and seeing what's being done by competitors to sort of, because you've got to learn. It's no good us sitting here thinking we're perfect, but and equally we welcome people coming and looking around our sites and sort of feedback. As long as it's delivered in a manner of collaboration rather than just pointing the finger.
And I guess if we stick on the amenity then, and we look at where we are now and the kind of provisions that we've had in the past, how do you see that moving forward? How's the dial moving forward? Because we've got to a point where I think we could probably bring in a bit of the co-work here, in that 3 or 4 years ago, you would probably have had a max exodus at 9 o'clock in the morning because all of the residents would have left, they've gone to work.
Yeah.
Whereas now they're resource heavy, they're in that building all day long.
Yeah.
And I think co-working and the co-working space we could maybe come on to in a little bit, but if we pull back into the amenity, what are you seeing in the trends? Because it feels like we're at a tipping point from what we have been providing, which I think has always been driven strongly by what the market perceives the residents want.
Yeah.
But I think we're flipping now to actually we need to really listen to what our residents are asking for.
Yeah, I think it's interesting seeing some sites evolve in a way, because you're getting much larger schemes now. You look at some of the Renneker stock that's come out. You get some really big sites where, because of the scale, they can deliver the amenity. And I think that's amazing, and I think there's an amazing market for that. At that end. So, and I then think there's a bit of a sort of an affordability bell curve to be assessed, where you will see slightly less amenitized than that, but still amenitized, absolutely delivering what the customer would wish. And if you're in a city centre, to the point you made, maybe you don't deliver a gym, because there's pure gyms, David. There's gyms at every different price point they want.
And people tend to be quite tribal. That's something that we've really kind of got under the skin of over the last couple of years. People are really tribal, not just in their usage of gyms, but they're also their working space. People have their own little coffee shop. Talking about Manchester today, but hidden away in the northern quarter, where they go and work for the day. They don't necessarily want that in their residential offering.
I'd agree. I think with things like gym, if you're going to do a gym, it needs to be done properly. It's no good offering the sort of the slight convenience gym like you get at a hotel, because I don't think people can go in there and get everything that they need or want. I think the co-working resident lounge, I think that's here to stay. I think, and where I was sort of going was, you've seen the larger schemes and they all have loads of co-work or resident lounge space, but I think even on the BTR Light product, or a larger scheme, but perhaps in a more peripheral part of town, a suburban part of town, you're still going to see that co-work resident lounge piece, because I think fundamentally the way we work and the way we travel now has changed. I think people are staying at home more, and by nature of BTR being what it is, the flats are they are a little bit smaller sometimes, or more efficient, shall we say, compared to PRS. I actually think they're better designed. I think there's more usable space in the BTR unit, but people like to get out, and if they can go and downstairs, have a nice coffee, work a bit, socialise a little bit, and then nip back to their room and walk the dog or whatever. They're getting the benefit of both, and again, it's a differentiator for BTR compared to PRS. So,
and are you seeing? Because it's an interesting one, isn't it? You go around a lot of the co-working spaces, maybe been developed and delivered over the last 5 years, and they can sometimes feel a bit clinical, and it almost feels like residents will actually go and find somewhere to work that isn't the formalised co-working space, because they feel a bit more comfortable. How are you finding that co-working product evolve in terms of the balance between formal, focused areas where people can get their head downs, to more, call it bump spaces where kind of individuals can knock into each other and build relationships? How do you find that works?
I think it goes back to that flexibility piece. So I think by nature of having a co-working space that could be a social space, I think I think naturally the demographic that we have within our schemes, they're usually fairly gregarious. They want to be part of the community. They want to interact with their neighbours. I think in the UK, compared to the US, we have an element of, once I'm in through the front door of my flat, I want to be left alone in a way. So
very English.
So if they want to be on their own, fine, go back to your apartment and make the private call. And we do supply sort of soundproof booths on occasion in these spaces where they can make a private call if they just need to nip in and do something. But by having that flexibility, it does allow you to be quite interactive with your sort of with your housemates, I suppose, or with your fellow community. But I think if we're going to sort of get into that formal, starchy co-working space, I think if you're going to commit that amount of amenity space to it, then you need the scale to really justify it. I think otherwise, if you're at 250 units, for instance, I'd be going down the route of having a much more flexible space and looking at how the space is used through the day. So I think you guys are, with the new schemes that you've brought online, and even Vox, which is, I think it was 2020 when that launched. The areas that we have there are quite flexible. They are used, on a Saturday morning, we might have a company arrive who are doing plants for people who've just moved in. It's definitely not a co-working space, but people do work there during the week. But in the evening, it's pizza and watch a film or whatever. So yeah,
good. And I guess kind of moving forward, what we were talking about earlier in terms of the operational management approach that you guys have, and it's that personable approach. One of the challenges, or I guess one of the I guess we're a challenge that sometimes BTR, and we'll talk about in a minute, co-living can sometimes have, is that we're creating these big apartments and these huge vertical towers in city centres, and we're just promoting loneliness. And I think that's always a bit of a concern. And it's always something that I think about when we start to appraise sites. And every time we do try, that we've got these vertical towers and we've got these corridors above.
Yeah.
And then right at the bottom, we've got this amenity. How do we, and we always try to, and we always try to knit in amenity throughout the building, but how do you as a business in Allsop kind of tackle that challenge of loneliness? And slightly different in a BTR to some of the co-living, because you've probably got a slightly more older age group or demographic that are probably more professional, but there's still that opportunity. Is that a responsibility for you as an operator?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's the pastoral element to it, that you don't want your customers being unhappy in a building.
Yeah.
I think there's as a statistic, you're exponentially more likely to renew your contract if you've got a friend living in the building with you. So you could say it's altruistic, trying to encourage your community, but actually, pounds and pence, it actually it pays. So I don't see these sort of big towers as islands.
Yeah.
They should be part of a community, a wider community as well. So, we interact with the wider community. There's other businesses there that we want to support. So the local coffee shop, for instance, a local pub, the gym if you don't have a gym. But even then, you want to be able to, perhaps they've got additional services that you don't. So we push those businesses through our app, and then we communicate. Often it might be a free lesson or a continual discount for our customers to visit. And then inside the building, we often invite those businesses into our building as well. So the gardening that I was talking about earlier. You've just moved into a flat. Actually, buying plants is a natural sort of thing to put your own stamp on it. But we've had, cocktail making, basket weaving, book reading. It's
and is the take up? Is it a strong take up? Because I always wonder when I see those.
It is
those events. Is it just one person just arriving and sitting at the back? But
no. I mean, I'm not a great fan of forced fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's sometimes what I feel it could be.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, it might be if I was living in a BTR site, I might be tucked away somewhere on a spreadsheet. But I think the type of demographic that we've got in our buildings, they
own it, don't they?
Well, they've chosen to live there because we've told them about the community that they're going to move into. They've told them about what Allsop will deliver for them when they move in. And then it's all about fulfilling those promises. So the customer expectation is that there's going to be a bit of that going on. Now, our job really is to open the door and let them push it.
Yeah.
The best thing that can happen, the moment you've cracked it, is when the residents are asking to organise their own events.
Yeah.
And then you've nailed it then. That's the perfect.
You can put your feet up then.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. But the events, usually they're well attended. We try to keep them flexible in terms of what they are, when they are. We regularly sort of canvass our customers to find out what would you like to be doing, and then importantly, our people get involved. So we'll drive it, and then we'll try to get others to sort of be involved with it. Whether you've got you might have a few tenants who sit on a little bit of a committee even, or you go to them and you get their ideas. There's loads of different ways of doing it. Each building has it does have a life of its own, a personality of its own. And that's partly down to the team, partly down to the customers. But fundamentally, if you can keep offering up that opportunity, I think most people will take it.
Yeah. So you mentioned in there the app. And
Yes.
this is another kind of challenge of mine at the moment, and guys challenged me with introducing prop tech into all of our developments, which I'm not sure can be done overnight. But
it's not like Guy to be challenged.
No,
is it?
no.
No.
But yeah, it's something that we are proactively looking to implement as we move forward, and it's sometimes a bit challenging with us because of the funding model that we select. Nonetheless, huge interest in it. I know recently you've entered into a partnership with Yardi.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit more about the benefits of prop tech from a delivery perspective first, and then maybe we can move into kind of the maintenance and operating. So we talked about a little bit there about the apps for the residents. How does that work in practice?
So we signed up with Yardi. So Yardi comes with an app. We skin the app, so the app is bespoke to the building, and then we will have various offerings on that app that supplement the customer service experience. So customer doesn't have to phone front desk if the washing machine breaks in the middle of the night. They can just press a button, through it goes. And the great thing is you get all the data on that. So in a way, when people are using the washing machines, because 2 o'clock in the morning, there we go. But it's much more than that. It's about, like I say, you've got the community events.
Yeah.
You've got the events calendar on there. You've got the elements of sort of the discounts and the retailers that they can access, and then they can access things like tutorials. So you'll have videos on this is how you use your washing machine, this is how your boiler works. This is how the radiator works. Everything, because you forget you can have certain sites where you've got a high proportion of the customers might have come from a different country, and the systems that we have here are different. They're not used to a wet radiator system with an electric boiler, for instance, or you might have air source heat pump, which has been a real education for a lot of people. So all of that sort of goes,
and all the admin can be worked through the app as well in terms of bills, utilities.
So they can access a tenancy agreement, they can pay their rent. There's if you've got a district system where you're sort of in control of the energy, then the energy piece goes through there as well. You can tailor it to your own requirements, and it really, the driver for us was, we had an app before and it had that same functionality. It's an end-to-end data piece now. So I can see from a customer experience perspective when they first apply for a property, what type of property they're interested in, what price point they're interested in, and then it goes into a CRM system, and then I'm assessing, okay, these are the types of people who are applying, but these are the type of, or rather inquiring, but these are the people who actually end up moving into our building. What is it about this building that attracts that demographic? And then obviously you've got all the repairs and maintenance stuff. There might be a certain propensity for a certain type of repair being required. Is that a latent defect?
Was that just a poor product?
Or is it a poor product? Is it user error? Do we need to roll out a bit of an education process for people? Can we help people not to become frustrated with our product because of user error? So it's trying to see off issues before they arise. Ultimately, all we're trying to do with the app is reduce the day-to-day friction of life. It's about convenience.
And it's refreshing, actually, because I think again, looking back at the last 24 months, there's been this drive to grab as much data as possible. And we've been introduced to parties looking to bring in sensors into the buildings that will monitor the usage of gym equipment, for example. They'll monitor the CO2 in the gym, so they can see actually how many people are there, and that can feed back to the residents, and the residents can go, well, I know it's probably 40% usage, so I'll go and use it today. From a cleaning perspective, you can see which corridors and communal spaces is actually being used. So I think this is all really exciting, but I think the positives that I'm hearing from you is that you're actually utilising that data, and I think that's the biggest challenge we've got. I think we're all desperately trying to get on board with the prop tech movement, and we can all see the benefits, but we need to make sure that we don't just get stuck with a load of, excuse the French, Excel spreadsheets with loads of data.
Totally. It's no good.
How are we actually using that?
What's the point in having numbers if you're not going to use them? You're not going to try and draw some kind of either a competitive advantage or I mean, ultimately, the customer experience piece gives you a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You drive rents because they're having an amazing customer experience. Are your renewal rates higher, which means you can drive rents on relet a little bit harder? You can test the market.
Yeah.
The leak detection, for instance, great. I'm all for that. What I'd like to see is, okay, the leak detection goes in. Will the insurance company underwrite a cheaper insurance policy because they know you've got leak detection in?
Yeah.
Can you prove that you're not having leaks year on year? Therefore, the insurance premium comes down. So we're having all of those conversations all the time. The CO2 sort of emissions in the gym makes me smile. But I think if I was sat in the gym, I don't think I'd be expiring too much because I don't exercise very hard.
No. I mean, I got a bit worried when they started talking about CO2 in the gym, and I thought, geez, where are we going with this one?
But I think it's easier just to look at the fob being used to go in and out. But again, it's really useful because have you got one person using that gym 10 times a day, or is it 10 people using it once a day? And as you say, when's peak period?
Yeah.
Because you can start to tell people, look, it's really quiet now. Do you want to come down? Or if it is so quiet that it's never being used after a certain time, then maybe it's time to switch the machines off, switch the lights off, and conserve a bit of energy.
And I think everybody's initial thought is, well, we need to avoid a Big Brother type scenario where we're monitoring everything, because this is people's homes, this is where they live, and this is where they want to relax and enjoy themselves. But you can start to see the benefits if you can implement some of these, light sensors, for example, or humidity sensors that can start to measure the environments in which we're working, living, and playing in. And then that drops us back into sustainability. We can reduce the aircon in that section of the building. We can reduce the amount of cleaning that we're doing because we know that specific corridor has never been walked along.
Yeah.
So I think there are these benefits, but I think we're still in that kind of maybe infancy. But it sounds like you guys are really kind of pushing the boat out on that at the moment.
Yeah, I don't get me wrong. I think there's room for improvement across the sector. I think if you went back 10 years and said, I'd like to put PV panels on the roof of a building, I think some funders would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
I think now, because it's driven by funders and their funders, I think people are much more open to this. So, we had, I think it was 1,300 halogen bulbs at the Keel because of the era it was built in.
Yeah.
The client was immediately happy to replace all of them.
Yeah.
So you're into 2.5 year payback on, but you've replaced halogen for LED. The Keel has a water source heat pump there now, so you've replaced gas with sustainable energy. I think we're on the right path. I think customers are also pushing for it. If you're in the north, it's something like 70% of our customers were really interested in energy efficiency and is the building they're living in energy efficient? It drops a bit as you go further south.
Yeah.
I think that's down to affordability, because I think people are probably a little bit more worried about their back pocket because the affordability ratios are that little bit harder. But
it's a tough one, isn't it? Because again, I think we are very conscious of our sustainability footprint.
Yeah.
And it's part of our ethos as a business. We don't just play at lip service. We're generally trying to implement as best we can, but it's always a weighing up of almost like a push-pull. I think in the last 5 years, it's been very much, we're trying to push it down, and government initiatives are pushing it, and it's always been really difficult because I've always thought to myself, are the residents prioritising this as one of the areas which they're thinking about when they're taking up, whether they move to one development or the other? And if I'm honest, I think in the last maybe 5 years, that's not been the case. But I've definitely seen a shift over the last 12, 24 months in the sustainability demands. And I think people are being a lot more aware. Are you seeing that? You've obviously touched on that, but you're seeing that as well. And ownership and people wanting to be ownership in terms of their energy usage in their apartments.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're worried, they're interested to know what their energy costs are going to be, but they also want to know what their impact on the environment is. And whether somebody would choose our building over another building, I don't have that statistic because it would be very, very difficult to get that kind of data. What I do know is that when our customers move in, they tell us that they're interested. And the most important thing you can do as an operator is demonstrate that you're listening to your customer. So we get that feedback, and sometimes there's suggestions there, and we'll deliver it. So, Vox, you've got, in fact, on all of our sites, we have closed recycling banks, for instance. It's really easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it's convenient. I mean, it means your bins aren't getting full of, raggedy old clothes. So it's sensible, but it's also good for the environment. You go with the fourth recycling waste stream, your BREEAM scores are better. So, the Vox scored very, very highly on BREEAM. So you can do things that suit your bottom line, suit the customer, and suit your funder all at the same time. I mean,
it's no brainer.
Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
And Glenbrook have always, I know for a fact Glenbrook have always done this. You've always considered this, because when we took Vox, you'd put PV panels in your spec before it went to the client, is my understanding. So you were already on that journey.
Yeah. And it's ongoing challenges. We're in a volatile market at the moment. We've got, geopolitical challenges across the world. Mr. Trump's back in Manchester as of Manchester in America as of Tuesday. It is a challenge, and it's just where it sits on that priority with the residents as well. I think from our side, we are pushing it, and it's an ever-going moving piece, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming away from the macroeconomics of amenity space, we've talked about BTR generally as a product, and I guess we've probably lent upon vertical BTRs, the city centre schemes that we've talked about, Manchester, Liverpool, London. Can it keep going? Do you think as a product we can keep building these developments? I'm just looking at some stats here, and Savills predicting that 55% of all new supply in 2033 will be in the core cities outside of London. Do we see that growth continuing? Do we think that, or do you think that we're going to see a push into some of the non-core cities, areas such as Nottingham, Leicester, Cambridge, Oxford, maybe some more of the London commuter towns, Watford, Brighton, maybe? I'm just trying to think. Do we think that's where it's going, or, and I know we mentioned it earlier, is it a case of the product itself as a vertical aspect is going to have to evolve into something maybe a bit lighter as we take amenity-rich products, which come with obviously a premium rental cost? How do we actually move those out into those wider markets? And if we think about Greater Manchester, areas such as Preston, Bolton, Blackburn, all those areas as well, how does that work? How do we evolve that product?
I think there's room for both, because I think you've got a rental range there where I think just because you're not wanting to pay quite as much rent as, say, you're not in the top quartile or not top decile, doesn't mean you don't want a really good service.
Yep.
I think, yes, it'll continue. I think, Manchester, it's 7-8 years ago, people were saying, oh, can this rental growth continue? Well, here we are. I think you look at Leeds is flying. I think you'll get other cities like Newcastle. I mean, I did the Forge in Newcastle 7-8 years ago. I'd like to see other BTR sites there. I think it's probably quite tough right now, viability wise. Build costs. Perhaps they'll start to steady a little bit, or increase less quickly. But I think when you're going into places like Blackburn and Bolton, I think you're less likely to see these sort of big vertical towers. But I still think you can see an amenitized product. I still think there's probably the market there. I think people work from home more now. I think they're probably, for those peripheral sort of places, they might be travelling into a major conurbation, but they're going to work from home, and a BTR light product will do very, very well. And we're seeing a lot of it, particularly in PD. And I think that really lends itself well for, again, going back to the sort of carbon footprint piece. If you can repurpose a building, amazing, do it. I mean, the Keel is probably one of the greatest examples of that going, frankly.
Yep.
But I think if you can, BTR in Watford is there already, and it'll continue to do very well. I think Brighton, brilliant. Nottingham, great city, great fundamentally, it's got employment, it's got the right demographic. I think it's got the, and if you can build it at the right price point, then I think definitely people will live there. But I think there is this opportunity to cater for a different price point, and to make PRS look bad. So the customer service ethos is there, but perhaps you don't have that heavy staffing structure which drags your gross to net down. Ultimately, it's a balancing act. But you might have somebody attend site. You might have one full-time equivalent, or you might have somebody visiting site twice a week, but you've still got this amenity product that can be delivered in a self-serve manner. And I think we're going to be launching a site in Leeds a little like that, either just before Christmas or just after Christmas, and essentially it's 110, 111 apartments, and it'll be a BTR-like product, but I think it'll do very well because it's at that affordability point.
And it's interesting, you touched on a few points there. One was affordability, and one was the PRS market. And one of the areas we were going to hopefully come on to is co-living.
Yeah.
And I think co-living's been born out of that desire to provide that same amenity-rich provision for key workers, people who work in the city, people who are working in the coffee shops in our city centres, all these people that need to be living in the city centre that maybe can't hit those price points of what traditionally BTR has been.
Yeah.
And I think from that position, I see, and maybe it changes on a daily basis, but I see co-living as a real great addition to our housing stock. I think there's a huge market and a huge place and requirement for slightly reduced rents, but still giving those people that on-the-doorstep amenity, that on-the-doorstep community. And you look at the other options available to those type of people. And again, if we take Manchester, just because we're sat here today, you could be renting for £800 to £1,000 a month in Salford or Didsbury in a shared apartment by an individual landlord with no amenity, drafts, problems with utility bills, and you've still got to commute into the city centre. Whereas you look at some of the co-living schemes that start to come to the market in Manchester as we speak today, and they're not far off the same price point, but they're allowing those people to be in the city. They're also allowing fresh graduates that have coming out of university. They're giving them that opportunity for a ready-made community. And you're also allowing transient people who are moving into the city, who might be working here for 6 to 9 months, or maybe are moving to the city for the first time and don't quite know where they want to live. You're giving them those opportunities. Where do you stand on the product of co-living, and how are Allsop's kind of, I guess, pivoting towards that increase in demand as we move forward?
It's an area I often get asked, would I do student accommodation? And I've always said no, because I think there are others out there that have scale and deliver it. They've got the structure for it, and I don't think we're there. We're a bit more like a boutique hotel in a way in that regard. And I think co-live has its place. It's as you say. I think in the regions, I imagine it's probably a little bit harder to make it stack. But I think as an alternative to living in a house share, I mean, I'd have loved to have had that opportunity to sort of think, okay, I can have my own space, it's mine. It feels a little bit more grown up. And then the common parts, fantastic. I mean, some of the stuff you see now, I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And as you say, it makes city centre living accessible for them.
And we've got to have a wide range of people moving into the city. There's no point in everybody being on huge salaries and living in the BTR schemes and everybody else commuting in. So there has to be that market.
Because otherwise, who is, cities are amazing by virtue of the diversity that they bring. So if everyone's just living in one of these BTR sites and everyone's the same, I think that's the death knell for city centre living. You've got to make it so that everyone can access the services.
Why do you think? I know you're not a planner and you don't work for MCC.
Certainly not.
But why do you think there's such anxiety for us all to go all in on co-living? Because there is in the market, isn't there? People are a little bit unsure.
I think planners. Well, I think the city centres probably have an issue with it, or rather, the city councils probably have an issue with it because they've got this idea in the head of why would anyone want to live in an undersized apartment? Why would anyone want to live in a broom cupboard?
Which is probably bigger than the house share that they're renting in.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I'd be saying you need to go and look at something. Because I sometimes wonder, have they been down and actually seen a professionally managed co-live product?
Yeah.
You know, and I'll drop Michael Howard a name check here. He's got some co-live stuff. Not far from some of our BTR stuff in Nine Elms.
Yep.
You go in and this isn't some squalid
No.
you're offering a sophisticated product with great customer service.
We recently, again name checking, but we were recently down at some of the folk schemes that they've got down there in London as well, and 100%. You look at the quality and you look at the provision of those rooms, and I think it's all about well thought out design. It doesn't necessarily need to be a huge apartment to be able to be a home.
It just needs to be thought through. You know, when you look at the design of these, they're neat, they're tidy, but they've been thought out.
Yeah.
It's thoughtfully designed. Right, where are the clothes going? Where's the storage?
Yeah.
How are they going to interact with the space? What's it going to be like when they're watching telly? Do they have to sit on the bed to eat dinner? You know, none of that.
And I think there's an expectation with the co-living schemes that the residents, the driver is to get them to some extent out of their rooms and to enjoy the amenity provisions that are offered, that are probably tailored towards maybe more community than you would maybe get in a traditional BTR. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. It feels like.
I think it's. I would imagine. I think you can access the same type of community in both buildings. I think you're probably more likely to leave your room because it is a bit smaller, and the amenity space as a proportion of the size of the building is larger compared to BTR quite often. But I think it's a product that you offer. You know, it's diversity, isn't it? You know, we don't all want to live in BTR. Some of us want to live in single family housing. Some of us want to be in co-live. Some of us will naturally work our way through all three tenure types.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the guys moving into these co-live might well have been in student, but they just want something that's a little bit more grown up, but they're not quite ready for BTR yet.
Yeah.
You know, it's an option.
It's an option.
Yeah.
And I think that probably brings us full circle to some extent. If we talked right at the very beginning about the early adopters and Gen Z's, millennials. I can't remember which one it was, but the 2010s where we started to see kind of the creation of the BTR model. Those people are now a little bit older.
Yeah.
They're starting to have children and families, and they've probably had their fill of city centre living. We're now seeing those guys move out into single family housing, which I guess presents a huge, I wouldn't say a challenge, but how do you provide that same level of operating and management care?
Yeah.
That at the moment is condensed to a ground, a first and second, third floor across a horizontal offering. And I know it's something that we're working through at our Milton Keynes scheme that we've got down with Urban Splash. We're really excited about that opportunity we've got there to kind of really create a destination.
Yeah.
And I know you've been involved in that process.
A little bit.
How do you transfer such a great product that you've taken 10, 15 years to evolve, and then spread it across single family homes? How does that work, and how does that look like in practice?
We've found it relatively straightforward.
Okay, well there we go. I'm completely wrong.
There are obviously challenges, but there's challenges with BTR as well.
Go on.
Yeah, no. I mean, we've launched single family housing sites in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
We've got a few: Norwich, Cambridge, Dartford, Basildon, places like this, Harrogate.
Yeah.
So there's a real variety, and what we tend to find is, as long as so these sites aren't manned, people go home and they live in their own house, but they still have all the same. They have all the same tech advantages that a BTR customer has.
Okay.
So they can speak to our people whenever they wish. They can phone, they can email, but they can also use the app. And our people we have somebody at these sites once a week as a minimum. So they're visiting and they're telling the customers that they'll be visiting. So they get that opportunity to meet them. And it's one of the reasons why our sites have been so successful. I mean, got a scheme in Rugby, the Pioneers. That was single family housing scheme of the year last year. So we're listening to our customers and we're asking them, what is it you would like to see? So maybe we'll maintain the front gardens, or I'm having a problem with how the air source heat pumps.
It's a big challenge.
Well, it's an odd one because we're also used to gas. So we're used to, okay, you touch the radiator, it's hot.
Yeah.
And then, my heating isn't working. It's like, well, are you warm enough?
That's the extent of the air source heat pump. Yeah.
Are you warm enough?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm warm enough.
It's just not hot.
It's a different type of heat.
Yeah.
So we have these conversations with our customers all the time. We control the process from start to finish. So we're still doing the leasing.
Yeah.
And it's really effective. But it's that engagement. It's the customer needs to feel like they can access you, that you'll listen to them, and then you'll act on it.
So it's a pivot. It's a pivot in a way, isn't it, from BTR city centre, where you've got that interaction on a daily basis. The residents are coming through, and you're seeing them. You can have that conversation, and it's how you manage that, really. And it sounds like that's via, again, constant communication, but through different forms.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, with BTR, it's your role to almost remind them every day why they live in your building.
Yeah.
Walk in, it's like, how are you? How's your day been? You can't do that with single family. It's not quite the same.
And I guess there's a part of the single families who don't necessarily need that.
No,
they're getting on with their lives. They've got things to do. It's probably they don't need that daily.
But there's no reason why that housing estate can't still be a community.
Yeah.
And you can still facilitate things. So, we had we were trying to encourage people to download the app. So we said, look, download the app. Because there's an ice cream voucher on there for your kids.
Yep.
And then we send an ice cream van to site, and they can all have a, and So it's
great.
This little thing. You've just got to work out how you engage with your community a little bit differently. So do you have a summer party, or do you use the green and you have a farmer's market, for instance? You invite, you can still do this stuff. It takes a little bit more thought, but it's a cultural thing.
Ultimately, it's the same principle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a culture. Allsop has a culture of wanting to deliver for our customers. We don't always get it right. It sometimes goes wrong, but learning from it, and part of that is design and how does a design change, but also our own actions and how we dealt with a certain problem and could we have done it a bit better or a bit differently. It's marginal gains all the time.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
And I guess the other area which we're only going to touch lightly on, I think, because I think both of us is probably a new market, but it's the later living.
Yeah.
And I think we've started to see slight growth in that market. There's a few schemes that have started to populate in Greater Manchester, and it's a population that is increasing all the time. I think notes here: 55 to 64-year-olds are the fastest growing segment of the population, increasing by 118% in 2020.
Yeah,
and we're getting to a point where, and I guess this sits across all offerings. I think, without speaking out of turn, I'm not quite in that bracket yet, but I think there's a real desire for a lot of that demographic to actually move back into the city. They want a little bit more, and I think, without being too presumptuous, a lot of them will have had children. They would have grown up. They would have moved on. They would have been left in these big houses, which two people rattling around in. And I think you've seen this drive of even in the BTRs in the city centre, and it'd be great to hear your feedback on what those age brackets are. But I think they are looking for more. They don't want to just, sit out the next 50 years rattling around a Victorian semi-detached. I think that what they want to do is they want to be involved in life. They want to come into our cities. They want to go to shows. They want to go to top restaurants. You know, if they want to move out to single-family homes, they want a community. You know, they want that kind of connection. What are you seeing? Are you seeing a slight change in demographics?
It's interesting because we've always had a significant minority of the sort of the older age bands within our BTR sites.
Yeah.
Which is great because it means A, you're being inclusive, but B, it means the younger end are behaving themselves. You know, we get a lot of BTR customers coming to us and sort of saying, "Oh, it's much better than living in student because people are a bit more respectful of the environment." And I think that's, you know, this is probably another proof point of that. I think you're right. I think just because you've hit a certain age, you should stop eating in nice restaurants. I think if anything, you've earned the right to, you've got rid of the kid.
Yeah.
Or,
time to go party.
Yeah, you've got more disposable income. And as you say, maybe you're going for a convenience lifestyle now. I mean, the reality is BTR is secure, 24-hour manned. You know, it's not a retirement home. You know, I think where we would hold back from getting involved is anything to do with sort of pastoral care in terms of, you know, the wider care package. Yeah. But the fundamentals of good customer service, and if it's an over 50s scheme, you know, well, why shouldn't it operate in exactly the same way as a BTR site, a traditional BTR site, but just with maybe the service and the amenity is more tailored towards what might interest that particular slice of the population. Yeah, I'm for more choice, mate. I just think choice is good. I think it creates competition. It creates a bit of more of an entrepreneurial approach, and also challenges us from a design perspective to be better.
So we talked at the very beginning about this desire or the shift in changes and aspirations, and some of that was pushed by the world that we were living in at that time. Some of it was just a change in generational expectations.
Yeah.
Where we are now in 2024, we're probably living in if not the same or maybe even more volatile world.
Yeah.
Where do you see the BTR brand model as an umbrella going? Do you think that people are moving away from that home ownership? Do you think that will swing back round, or do you think that BTR has offered that great alternative that we can now live in harmony with ownership and rental?
I think there's such a chronic undersupply of housing in this country that the two will continue to exist. I think BTR has to continue. I think it has to get better at articulating what it is.
Yeah.
I think where you've got locations where there's enough of it, I think that's demonstrated. I think Manchester's a great example. If you go down to London, Liverpool now, Leeds, you know, if you asked a tenant, do you know what build to rent is? A lot of them might say no, but you know, if you're going on things like Rightmove now, you can see built for renters. I think what they would say is, oh, does that mean where the landlord owns everything?
Yeah.
And then they can talk about the amenity and the services. Those are the bits that matter to these people. It's the experience they have at site. So I think build to rent will continue. I think some people who right now might say, I'd love to own a home in 10 years. It might become 15 years for them just as a result of financial constraints.
Yeah.
After 15 years, they might well decide, you know what's the point?
Yeah. What
is the point in home ownership when I can have this experience?
Yeah.
But I think there is a generational difference, but whether or not you ever fully break that down, you know, you sort of kill that whole, you know, an Englishman's home is his castle. I don't think you'll ever quite get rid of it.
No.
I think not everybody, but the significant majority will want to own their own home. But I think the reality is, whilst they're not, BTR's the next best option. I mean, whether it's a BTR light or BTR with bells and whistles,
or even a co-living, which then sits on that sliding scale, doesn't it?
Or co-live, yeah. I think there's a place for them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be doesn't have to be age related.
No.
Doesn't, but it's optionality, and it's a better option than, frankly, what was a pretty naff PRS sector 15 years ago, which it was just, there's good landlords out there and there's bad landlords out there, but there wasn't enough product. There wasn't enough good product, and I think the more we can build, the better at all price points, because I think that'll help everybody.
Very good. Great.
All right.
That's been absolutely fantastic.
That's my 2 pence worth. Anyway,
we really enjoyed having you. Thank you very much.
No, it's been good fun. That I don't do these things very often.
Well, it's a first for me. So, so I'm going to say hopefully we're the last. But Matt, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
And thank you for all those that have viewed today.